Vasudevaya. melted, a couple of days old from Uncle Audrey, but it can be distributed. Somebody may want to get another bag and put it in. I just can't ship it because it's taking so long to get to people now. I'm afraid it's going to be spoiled. Okay, see that. You may want to distribute it after we chant. Maybe hard to see you chant early in the mouth. Please repeat. Bojamanasya Rishibir Bojamanasya Rishibir Atmanas Taj Jigrishataha Atmanas Taj Jigrishataha Karna Cha Nirabhyajitam Karna Cha Nirabhyajitam Disha Sotram Graha Disha Sotram Guna Graha Bojamana Shari Shibir Atmanastaj Jigrishataha Karnochan Nirabhyajitam Dishashotram Gunagraha Bojamana Shari Shibir Atmanastaj Jigrishataha Karnochan Nirabhyajitam Dishasotram Gunagraha Bojamana Shari Shibir Atmanastaj Jigrishataha Karnochan Nirabhyajitam Dishasotram Gunagraha
Bojamanasya Rishibir Atmanastaj Jigrishataha Karnochan Nirabhyajitam Dishasotram Gunagraha Bojamanasya Rishibir
Atmanastaj Jigrishataha Karnochan Nirabhyajitam Dishasotram Gunagraha
Bojyamanasya Rishibir Atmanastaj Jigrishataha Karnochan Nirabhyajitam Dishasotram Gunagraha
Bojamanasya Rishibir Atmanastaj Jigrishataha
Desiring to understand.
Desiring to understand.
Rishibir. By the authority.
By the authorities.
Atmanaha. Of the Supreme Being.
Of the Supreme Being.
Tat.
That.
Jigrishataha. When he desired to take up. Karna. The ears. Cha. Also. Niravidyatam. Became manifested. Disaha. The direction. Of the God of air. Sotram. The power of hearing. Gunagraha. And the objects of hearing. Translation. Please repeat. By development of the desire. Of the great sages to know. The ears. The power of hearing. The controlling deity of hearing. And the objects of hearing. Became manifested. The great sages. Desired to hear. About the self. By development of the desire of the great sages to know. The ears, the power of hearing, the controlling deity of hearing, and the objects of hearing became manifested. The great sages desired to hear about the self. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. It's stated in the Bhagavad Gita, by advancement of knowledge, one should try to know about the Supreme Lord, the summum bonum of everything. Knowledge does not mean knowledge only of the laws of nature or physical knowledge, which are working by the direction of the Lord. Scientists are eager to hear about the physical laws working in the material nature. They are eager to hear through the medium of radio and television about things taking place far away from them on other planets. But they should know that the power of hearing and the instruments for hearing were given to them by the Lord for hearing about the self or about the Lord. Unfortunately, the power of hearing is misused in hearing the vibration of mundane affairs. The great sages were interested in hearing about the Lord through Vedic knowledge and nothing more. That is the beginning of oral reception of knowledge. That is the beginning of all receptions of knowledge. Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai.
Om Ayati Milandasya Ginanjana Salakaya Kachun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Kuroti Vachalam Pangam Langai Kegirim Yakripatam Aham Bande Shigurun Dinataranam Shigurun Dinataranam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Iswaram. So here, in a sense, Srila Prabhupada puts us in our place. We're just devotees. And it's difficult for modern educated people because there's this tendency due to so much mocking and ridiculing to think of the devotees as less intelligent and much of the scientific community. Why? Simply because they have faith in the supreme miraculous person who possesses inconceivable energy and performs wonderful pastimes. They have no faith like that. That's not something cheap. That's what is the beginning of devotional life. And without faith, how can anybody be a devotee? So these rascals, they think the devotees are less intelligent. And consequently, they're absorbed in hearing only about subject matters in this world. We don't have to consider it very deeply to understand how much humanity is absorbed in the affairs of politics. Nor do we have to consider it very deeply how much we are all absorbed in the matters of life and death, health. Where the whole world is, can't stop thinking about it. That's all that's spoken about on public airways, practically speaking. So, even when it comes to understanding the life in our universe, they're busy talking about it in terms of what they can see and hear or perceive through their various instruments. It may not be radio or TV, but some sort of computer instrument, some sort of laser rays or this rays or that rays that they're saying that they're bouncing off of this or bouncing off of that and understanding this and that they're picking up from their satellites. They're completely absorbed in this mundane world and have no faith in the knowledge that has come down to humanity since time immemorial, that all of our ancestors had faith in. Even in the world outside of India, and specifically in this time of Kali Yuga within the last 5,000 years, even they, for most of the century, they have had faith in some, religious scripture, glorifying God, and primarily in his Brahman feature, or in his Paramatma feature, to occasionally appear before the devotees in their religious scriptures, in their books of law. still glorified God, and God made up the basis of their life for most of those centuries. It's only within the past few hundred years that the scientific, so-called scientific community, people who want to know, who investigate, who examine, who experiment, and who simply rely on facts, that they're popped up. And no wonder when we try to see God like that, how is it possible? Just like if I want to see the President of the United States, that I want it on my terms, unless I'm someone very, very valuable to the country and to his administration, how is it possible on my terms I can induce and force the president of a country to come and see me? That's not even possible. So then what to speak of God? This is all child's play. This is just child's play for him. They're completely ignoring his administration. So then, if you ignore the administration of any government, then how well are you respected? How much are you given facility? How much do they go out of their way to serve you if you're completely disrespectful to the administration? But that's what they're doing. They're saying that, basically they're saying that everything is impersonal. Or they're saying that beyond this human life, it's nothing. It's nothing when we die. And they're getting away with this stuff. They've been getting away with it for the past many, many decades. You have some, religious people that are holding on to their, their dogma, their doctrines, and they're wanting to have faith in God. But again, that personal touch is extremely limited. It's extremely limited. It's simply based on the affairs of God within recent centuries in this world, practically speaking. Or it's based on the creation tales in their religious scriptures, which have been, documented that they've been handed down and handed down and handed down. And it's questionable in scholastic circles where it all begun. But there's not a denial that of all those tales, that the most ancient of the Vedic knowledge. And so we, as devotees, have great faith in Krishna. We have great faith in these so-called tales. We have great faith in the personality of Godhead, Bhagavan Sri Krishna, and his Vishnu expansion, and his expansions for the administration of this universe. No, we have great faith in the arrangement of God on our planet. We completely support that there has to be a government administration, that there has to be different types of people working for the good of humanity, in a cooperative manner, so that we can all derive, some prosperity in order to be able to live comfortable enough to simply take the time and trouble in this world to understand Krishna and to meditate on him, to fix our mind on him, to develop faith in him, and learn to love and glorify him. Otherwise, how can all the people escape the paranoia of material life, the fear of material life, they can't get away from it. They're taking different types of medicine to get away from it. And some people wonder if it's making it worse. But in our Vedic culture, all we need to do is hear about Krishna, the transcendent. For example, there's a benediction given by Lord Krishna himself that for those souls who remember the pastime of the battle that took place between his Narayan Dwara and Lord Shiva's Shiva Dwara, that we can capture the benediction of Lord Krishna to become fearless. But it should be done, Lord Krishna says, in the early morning hour. This was a great fight. He didn't necessarily say 3 o'clock, he said early morning hour. The great fight that where Lord Shiva was protecting his devotees because he had promised to do so. And Krishna was protecting his grandson, if I'm not mistaken. In any case, Lord Shiva and Lord Krishna ended up having to fight with one another. And other members of the Yadu dynasty were fighting with ever powerful souls, such as Lord Shiva's son, who were extremely important, famous, and powerful in this universe. One, the scribe of the Vedas, who wrote all this down for us originally, and is considered, the wisest, and that, no religious functions are performed without first worshiping him. And another, the commander of all the celestial forces, who also protects all of his devotees, Murgadev or Kartikeya, the commander-in-chief of all the devas. Lord Indra is right on man when it comes to battle. So they were fighting with other members of the Yadu dynasty, like Padumna, Satyaki, very powerful souls. Padumna considered an incarnation of sometimes Cupid, sometimes the Vishnu expansion. And Satyaki he's the commander-in-chief of Krishna's forces. He's so powerful that we could speak for days about his exploits. But Krishna himself had to fight with Lord Shiva, because after all, he's Mahadev, the greatest of the Vedas. Maheshwar, the destroyer of the universe. He is practically none different from Krishna. He's like Krishna compared to milk, and him compared to yogurt. Yogurt's certainly not milk, but how is it different from milk? So when Krishna comes in contact with the material nature, he becomes Sambhu or Lord Shiva. So they're fighting with one another, and Lord Shiva is releasing his most powerful weapons. And Krishna is skillfully counteracting each and every one of them, until at last Lord Shiva releases on the field of battle his weapon of ultimate destruction. Known as Shiva Dwara, it appears on the battlefield with 3 heads and 3 legs. And it rushes at Lord Krishna in all of its fury. But it is used at the time of the cosmic devastation because its power is no less than 12 times the might of the sun. And it charges at Krishna. So to counteract the Shiva Dwara, Lord Krishna releases the Narayana Dwara. The Narayana Dwara is the personification of extreme cold. In this material world, Srila Prabhupada said, one can always tolerate heat. But when cold sets in, everything collapses. And he gives the example of death. At first the body becomes very hot with heat, and then cold. And everything collapses. And that's what happened. Soon the Shiva Dwara was freezing to death. And he called upon his master for protection. But Lord Shiva had now come to the extent of his potency. He couldn't send any aid to his beloved Lord. So as the Shiva Dwara froze to death, he became most fortunate. For he clearly understood the exalted position of Lord Shri Krishna. And he took advantage of that understanding to engage himself in bhakti yoga by offering offering prayers to lotus feet of Lord Shri Krishna. The Shiva Dwara, he declared Lord Krishna to be the summum bonum of the absolute truth, just like Srila Prabhupada says here. It's stated in Bhagavad Gita, by the advancement of knowledge, one should try to know about the Supreme Lord, the summum bonum of everything. So the Shiva Dwara declared Lord Krishna to be the summum bonum of the absolute truth, the source of all that is material and all that is spiritual. The Adi Purusha, the original divine person, from whom all other persons exist. Sarvakarna Karanam, the cause of all causes. The supreme personality of Godhead, expanded into infinite form. Each is divine and powerful as the original. And all of them possessed of unlimited potency, unlimited attributes, paraphernalia, entourage, and pastime. And all of this articulated by countless sound vibrations, names, none different from his very self. So when Lord Krishna heard these prayers from the Shiva mouth of the Shiva Dwara, he immediately benedicted him with immunity from the counter-attack, because it wasn't an attack. The Narayana Dwara did not attack the Shiva Dwara. The Narayana Dwara countered the attack of the Shiva Dwara. And he was given immunity from that counterattack. Immediate immunity. And furthermore, Lord Krishna benedicted the entire universe with the blessing that whomever would remember this pastime in the early morning hours shall become fearless. But such an easy remedy is swept out the door. You know, it's something that only women and children and faithful devotees of God have some faith, have some belief in. But this isn't what we should teach in a school, other than a religious school. Or maybe if we teach it, it's taught as Hindu mythology. So how do we help people to have faith? That's the great job of a preacher or minister. We took this word, preacher, from the English language. The job of the sages, the brahmanas, the devotees, to instill faith and people in general. In Christianity, such people were called ministers, also priests, like we use the word, we generally translate Brahmana as priest. Preachers is a common word, although nowadays amongst a lot of people it has a sort of a bad nomenclature. People don't think of a preacher very well because a preacher is always teaching something by, they say, preaching at you. He's always preaching, right from wrong, and many times they've developed somewhat of a bad name for condemning people, condemning them to hell. You're bad, you're going to hell. You have no faith, you're going to hell. They've used that strategy. You have no faith, you'll burn in hell. You don't believe? So, a lot of modern educated people, they would just see this as a manipulation of the mass of people out of fear of what will happen to me at the time of death. And so, sometimes the word, preacher is felt like that by other people. We can simply change words around. They also don't like the word religion a lot of times. A lot of people don't. Not everyone, but a lot. And so, but if you use the word, spirituality, a lot of those same people are more open to the word. If you use the word even like yoga teacher, or teacher, simply teacher, teaching ancient Vedic texts, like our devotee, disciple of Jayapataka Maharaj, Palashi Sringer. He's like so expert, He's an astrologer and, a palm reader and a musician. And he's really good at chanting the mantras, singing the mantras, and speaking from the Bhagavatam, and putting all this into a context for modern people to appreciate and understand, even when speaking to aristocratic people or educated people. And he has a big following because of that. And he teaches Krishna consciousness in that manner. He calls himself the Vaishnava Brahmana. And he wears the wooden shoes that sadhus wear in India. And he usually has some fancy kurta or no shirt on with just a charter on. And he's got his hair all oiled back. He's got a beard, but he's a married person. And this way he teaches Krishna consciousness. So we have to somehow ever, reach into the depths, or through the depths of Maya to reach the soul, so that they can have some appreciation of Krishna consciousness. Even Srila Prabhupada, he would say when we go to the university, you have to speak about the self, the difference between the body and the Atma. They don't understand that. How would they think about these stories? Now, he didn't say that part. I had it, because I remember my own experience. When I was at the temple in New Orleans, our original temple was close to Tulane University, and we would get students at the Sunday feast. And the temple president would read from Krishna book. And I would always cringe, because I would think, what are these students going to think? They're just going to think this is mythology that he's reading to them, They need to understand the science of the soul, which is what Krishna teaches in the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. So, we have to figure out how to help each person. We had Drew Miller here yesterday. I put on a post on when I went to the cow barn and did a video of Katya milking with Drew Miller and a PhD graduate, recent graduate from LSU, who's a disciple of Jayapataka Maharaj, who's name is Deepak Singh, but he's initiated Dinapavana Guru Chandra. So Dinapavana Guru Chandra was there, and Dramila was there. I should have used the analogy that just like Katya is deriving milk from this cow, Dramila is distributing books throughout the city of New Orleans. And he meets all kinds of people. In fact, he's even famous for distributing books to famous entertainers and some athletes. But a lot of entertainers, a lot of Hollywood actors, and all kinds of actors. He's distributed so many books. He would even, if he saw one, or if he heard that one was eating in a restaurant, he would go to that restaurant and sit down with the person and introduce himself, and gradually, after some conversation, leave him with one of Prabhupada's books. But I didn't use that analogy. Instead, Drew Miller did actually a lot of the talking in the background, because he was also shooting a video at the same time. He didn't start when I started, but he was shooting, so he was talking. And you could easily hear what he was saying when I was shooting my video, which was mainly the milk coming out of the cow's tits into the bucket. So, just like Drew Miller uses the power of humor. He makes people laugh so much they can't resist taking the book. Many of them walk away saying, "You're the best thing I've seen since I've been here." And this is something he, developed over years, but something that he did way back in the beginning. Way back in the beginning when he was just Bhakta Dan. He was taken out with the devotees to Yellowstone National Park. And all the devotees are distributing, and he's distributing. And he's trying to figure out how to distribute these people a book. So he put on a cowboy hat. And he got this candy. And it was like a yellow candy in a wrapper. And he would imitate a Texas sheriff. And he would say, "What are you doing there, you scoundrel? Where are you from? New York? You Easton." He'd say some name. And in this way, he would say, "Did you get the?" And I forget exactly how he did it, but he would give him one of these yellow candies, and he would call it a Yellowstone. And he would give him that Yellowstone. And then gradually, as they were enjoying the time with him, he would give them a book and collect a donation. Or even the opposite way around. He would collect a donation and give them a book. And so one day, the conservation officers, the park officers, come knocking on the door in the early morning. And the leader of the party, he rolled down the window. The sheriff, he says, "You guys have been disturbing the people." And they got all these other distributors there that are more experienced, and they've been somewhat frustrated because Drew Miller's selling a lot more books. He's Bhakta Dan, and he's selling a lot more books. And so they're all thinking, Then the sheriff says, "And I'm not talking about that Texan." So this has been like his career over the past 30-something years, He goes out and distributes Prabhupada's book using the power of humor to meet people. He does a tremendous amount of praying. Asking Krishna, to send him a person, send him somebody that will listen. He suffers a lot of, besides the heat and the cold, rejection. And he has to consider that things like, am I being pure enough, or am I just desiring something for myself? He internally thinks like that. Am I just out here for my own ambition or to collect money for me? Or am I trying to do this purely to please Guru and Guranga and thereby get their mercy? Because when we get Lord Chaitanya's mercy, then one can spread love of God. So sometimes, Srila Prabhupada would say to his disciples, and that was certainly, none of us were devotees for more than 10 years, he would say, what is your 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute lecture going to do? Distribute them a book. A book will stay with them. So devotees became many devotees became expert at distributing books. I mean, even, Maharani, she's expert at selling people things just by her nature. So one time on her birthday, I think when she turned 40, she went downtown. Now, she never did really turn 40, but, she went downtown and distributed 40 Bhagavad Gitas, hardback Bhagavad Gitas, just like that. Because, it requires some potency, however we get that potency. And it can be had by the devotee in whatever way that we serve Guru and Guranga. If we sincerely do our best to please them, then Krishna will give us the power to do whatever our job may be. Just like our Giri. I mean, that was like a week marathon. Did you ever have to walk up and down a ladder in the middle of the day, or even when it's cooled off a little bit, painting? I mean, I wrote, when they published the minutes, they put down that, we had purchased $600 to purchase all this paint. And they were saying for everything, but it was $600 just for the paint on a 2-story building. So then I delineated all the painting that Giri had done over the past month or so. And it was 13 different things. I think he begun with the altar. We bought a special paint for $110 a gallon, gold paint. And Giri came in and painted the Srimad on the altar. Not an easy job. He had to clean off the dust first. And then it was one thing after the other. I mean, he did the whole floor of the porch, and he had to deal with the rain and the humidity, and whether it's drying and not drying, whether people were going to walk on it. And he oiled up all the walls and the doors. He didn't paint it, but he put this teak oil on it. He had to get up there with his hand like this and do that. And so, just one building after another. And where did he get that power from? I mean, the guy's over 40. I mean, he must be 50. But he has this work ethic that you find in people from, Central America, from Mexico and Central America. We wouldn't be able to eat if it wasn't for those people. Who do we think comes in, picks all that stuff, and does all that farm work? I mean, I know all of it's, high tech, and it's just one guy driving around the tractor, and there's all this irrigation stuff and fertilization stuff and insecticides and all, but still there's people picking all those apples and other things that they can't do by machinery. And there's so many people in the construction industry, and there's a lot of these jobs, a lot of Americans won't do because they want to do an office job, or they'll drive a truck. But to get out there and work in the garden, generally you have to hire, the people from Mexico, because they have a certain work ethic, and they've lived like that. They've had to grow their own food. They had to make a living. They have to somehow have to make a living. Like even in India, you can find people because people have to work to make a living. So they're willing to do any kind of work, to make a living, to be able to put some bread. In America, they say bread and butter on their family's table. Otherwise, they don't eat. So these people, they do all these hard manual labor jobs. So Krishna, he empowers the living entities. to do work. When we do that work for Krishna, it becomes devotional service. And faith develops. I mean, I didn't walk in the door with faith. If I had faith in another culture, which I certainly doubted. And, you know, and by reading the wrong books, had a complete impersonal view of life. And couldn't appreciate any personal presentation. To me, it just sounded like mythology. But by performing devotional service to the right person, to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and its bona fide representative, faith develops. That's the start. To develop, you know, faith develops. So, you know, Srila Prabhupada also said, if your mom is a devotee, you'll be a devotee. Because the mother instills faith. So my mother instilled some faith in the Christian God, but, you know, that faith through so much indoctrination in scientific study, which wasn't a lot, but I mean, you know, just through grade school and high school, you know, I mean, you become somewhat doubtful about a personal view of God. And then to hear books from other cultures that also delineate the impersonal feature of God, you know, in a way that you may not have heard, then, you know, you start to see life in that way. And so when I would go and live here to devotees, you know, I didn't have any faith in what they were saying unless they talked about reincarnation or karma. Talking about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, you know, it just sounded like David and Goliath fighting to me in the Christian Bible. So, but gradually, by serving Guru and Guranga, then some faith starts to seep in, you know. And you can start to have faith in a Krishna book. To the extent that the brahmacharis would sit down and hear Krishna book so much that, you know, they could recite, practically speaking, story after story. Because they had such great faith in the Leela of Lord Krishna. And that's, you know, that's what brahmacharis do. And, you know, in ISKCON ashram, you know, they study Krishna consciousness. And, you know, they're always engaged in hearing and chanting whatever they do. So a golden opportunity for, you know, anyone to be a brahmachari. And Prabhupada said it was the safest dharma. Because, you know, householders can get overwhelmed and sannyasis can get proud. But a brahmachari is always a menial servant who has plenty of opportunity to hear and chant. I mean, that's, you know, their life. So anyways, now it's way too late. So we have to stop. We distributed the birth meeting. Okay, so I hope that kept y'all, that got y'all through this.
I disagree with you on this subject matter about only the Mexicans can go to the garden. Mother Darling Kelly goes in there every single day religiously.
But she was trained to go out and preach every day.
Yeah, but she went to the garden.
So she just, she just substituted it.
I disagree.
But how many years do you expect her to do that? We got to get young people to go into that.
Her husband on the other side tells me we're all going to die in 2 years. And I'm like, what? He literally told me 2 years will be gone.
Say 20 years.
No, he said 2 years. He looked at me and said 2 years will be gone.
Who knows? I mean, Bhakti Chuma.
I said, I don't know, I don't want to go, maybe you, but I was like, I don't want to live here forever serving Krishna. But he said, that's illusion, 2 years. You got to find young people, he said.
Yeah, we do, we have to somehow.
But truly she does. I mean, I'm there every day. She's just so religiously, like what is that word, like very regulated,
We'll have to get
She's there every single day.
woofer program going again after this pandemic sometime, find some place for them to stay and then just make it a little bit more Krishna conscious, you know.
Yeah, but dedication.
Because there's so many people out there that want to come and they're willing to do Krishna consciousness for a couple of weeks, you know, along with their dogs. And so that can have a profound effect. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.